And the final part of this series will be part 7, which is also a question and answer forum.
Media's reaction to I guess the Democrats and liberals' reaction to the report released yesterday was that there's no new information, and then Clinton herself brushed it off as a conspiracy. What do you hope and predict, because obviously they're two different things, that the media, the Democrats, the liberals, and also the Republicans, how do you think they're going to react to this report today?
Largely silence. I mean, I don't think we're going to hear much about it. We should. I mean, Fox News is here. Hopefully we'll see it there. Dana Milbank was here. We kind of know what his is going to be. A bunch of conspiracy theorists got together and, you know, put on their tin hats and blah, 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 you know, as usual. I would hope, I mean, it's really an incredible report, I've got to say. And, you know, that if people read it, they will really get a clear picture of the foreign policy, of the motivations, of the ideology, you know, and what their priorities were, and how they viewed the military and the people in it. It just, it's appalling. And I'd love to say that NBC News will be leading with this story tonight. They came to, but they're not even here, you know. I mean, and believe me, they were all invited. So
I haven't read either report.
yeah,
Anywhere is the video has been discussed a lot, which was the video that they said caused this whole uprising. Is anyone saying that Hillary Clinton, Ambassador Susan Rice, or the White House lied about that directly? Is that something that is said?
Yeah, absolutely they lied. There's no question. We know again from Judicial Watch documents obtained through the FOIA process that the administration, including the president and the Secretary of State Clinton, were actively involved that very night while the attack was still going on in concocting a false narrative to deflect the story from the truth and to defend at all costs, even the cost of American lives, the re-election campaign of the president. They were not even decided on which video they were going to blame. They only knew that they were going to blame a video. I don't know if you know about this, but there was another video out there created by a minister named Pastor John, and this is another obscure video on the internet. And there was discussion in the White House that night about which video, that one or the innocence of Muslims, would be blamed for the attack on our mission in Benghazi. They settled on innocence of Muslims. But to show you that the narrative had already been decided, that it was going to be blamed on a YouTube video. And don't forget, the only person so far ever jailed, Abu Khatala is in detention, but ever jailed in connection with this debacle was the filmmaker of Innocence of Muslims, all right? And we are still waiting for any of the other principal jihadi militia leaders to be detained, to be assassinated, to be held to account. All of the people that, unfortunately, Christopher Stevens chose to work with, Abu Sufyan bin Kumu, Abdul Hakim Belhaj, people like these are still out there running around Libya, one must expect, without any accountability. So the narrative was decided in order to protect the re-election campaign of a president at the cost of American lives.
so I want to mention something else. We've talked about Judicial Watch, and they've done phenomenal work. We also have been filing Freedom of Information requests, lawsuits. Our attorney, John Clark, is over here, and he's been working tirelessly for 3 years helping us do this. I mean, unlike Gowdy's committee, they had $7 million. We've basically done this on nothing. So nobody's made any money except John. But, yeah, Cliff.
Roger, to follow up, you know, this character who was sitting behind me, Dana Milbank, you
Right.
know all about
Yeah, yeah.
his agenda. He asked one question of Gowdy, your reaction to the Gowdy report, and I can write the article.
Right.
Citizens Commission on Benghazi holds news conference to accuse Republicans of being in on the conspiracy, that the Republicans are covering for Hillary Clinton. They're so in debt to the Muslim Brotherhood that they won't let Ted Cruz's bill come up for a vote in the Senate. I mean, you can see the article even before he writes it.
Right.
You can predict it. And that's the kind of media we deal with. I guess I'm throwing up my arms and wondering what can be done. Great for Fox News that they're here. Great that they had the Uncle Sean Smith on. But it is a tough road to hoe,
Yeah.
especially, Claire, when you suggest that this conspiracy of the Muslim Brotherhood is so vast and goes back so far and is so deep that even the leadership of the Republican Party in the House and Senate are unwilling to tell the truth about it.
So when Pompeo was up there with Gowdy yesterday, and they did release that supplemental report, additional comments, and he did come back up, and Pompeo said, yes, Hillary's actions were morally reprehensible. And so at least Gowdy didn't block them from being up there with them to say what they wanted to say. I mean, what his motivation is hard to know, but
Well,
yeah, go ahead, Ace.
it's, you raise a very good point, and it's the Muslim Brotherhood penetration, which is far deeper than the communists of the 30s, 40s, and 50s. I mean, it has affected not only our domestic, but our foreign policy to a degree that you can't imagine. Where do you think all these restricted rules of engagement have come from that have caused so many of our military lives and the permanent injuries? What, in effect, we've done with these restricted rules of engagement is we've taken away our military technology advantage and leveled the playing field to the advantage of Al-Qaeda and the rest of the Islamic State militias. That's what we've done. I mean, this nonsense that we're going to go win the hearts and minds of a tribal society is nonsense. That's all it is. So, I mean, look what's happening today. Your immigration is out of control. This administration is seeding known Muslim terrorists throughout this country. And what did the Republican leadership do? They funded it all. They funded all of these illegal programs. And you tell me we have congressional leadership? We don't have any.
Let me say, it's almost 4, but this is too valuable. I'm not going to stop it right now. We're going to go on for another 15, 20 minutes, and let's see what happens. And yeah, James.
Okay, fair warning, I'm going to use the T word, okay? Is there a way to get some mileage out of this by feeding this to Trump, who needs training, needs information on what's going on that he's going to have to deal with through the competition, the campaign, as well as if he does make it to the White House? Is there a way to get this information to him so at least something can come of it? Because most, as we're saying, most people are going to be wanting to bury this.
Well, I can say this. We know his top people have this. Now, what happens with it from there, I can't say. But anybody want to say anything? Yeah.
Do you think that, obviously, you mentioned that the Republicans are also covering up for Clinton in a sense. Do you think that could be caused by Trump's kind of dividing the Republican Party?
Go ahead.
I would not agree with that premise, no. I think rather that the blame, the culpability, the dereliction of duty surrounding the Benghazi debacle is spread so far and wide across agencies, across departments, across the party aisle, and throughout Congress that many on both sides, Democratic and Republican, share culpability for what happened there. And I think they know it.
Yeah. Okay, 1 second.
Alliance. Keith Schiller, Trump's director of security, is a former narcotics detective, but also a Navy veteran. That might be the back channel to get into to see Trump. When I went to Trump's headquarters and invited him to Rolling Thunder, I went to the building and I ran into Keith, who never met me before, but I was wearing all his biker regalia, and he just brought me up to headquarters, and I was able to, you know, I don't even ride, but Rolling Thunder said that's very But anyway, my other question is as to John Brennan. If the stand-down order was given, and John Brennan, Deputy Director of CIA, is a Muslim, could he have interjected that stand-down order into the chief of station?
At the time we're talking about, in Benghazi, September 2012, John Brennan was still at the National Security Council. And the director of CIA was General David Petraeus.
Yes, okay, I'll come here next.
Hi, Faith McDonald from the Institute on Religion and Democracy. Thank you so much. My question is, in light of the abdication that didn't go through, Admiral, do you think that that was influenced by R2P, that this was like a Samantha Power thing?
Yes.
Responsibility to protect the new UN doctrine of
Yeah,
So,
responsibility to
You want to
protect.
take it, Claire?
Sure. What you're talking about is a policy theory that goes by the name Responsibility to Protect, or R2P. It has been strongly championed by Samantha Power, at that time senior advisor to the President on National Security Affairs. And the premise of R2P essentially says that if a regime, a government, is engaged in war crimes, genocide against its own people, that others in the world have a responsibility to violate the sovereignty of that state, Westphalian system breakdown, and enter into that state, cross the border of that state in order to save those perceived to be the victims of the genocide or the war crimes. And it is this policy that Samantha Power most strongly championed within the Obama White House at that time. And yes, I think very certainly did play some role in the Obama administration decision to go into Libya. Obviously, not accounting for the very strong affiliation with the Muslim Brotherhood that led that revolution. And also, by the way, something that's not really been mentioned, but we've got it in the report, and that is very strong indications that the motivation for the president and some around him might have been ideological, certainly to do with the Muslim Brotherhood, perhaps with R2P. But the motivations of some, including the Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and perhaps some around her, including advisors like Sidney Blumenthal, was at least in part financial. They expected to reap financial benefit, lucrative deals in the wake of the ouster of Gaddafi. And that, I think, at least in some measure, motivated Clinton and some of those most closely associated with her, and perhaps with the Clinton Foundation, to promote the invasion of Libya, including very strong urging from Sidney Blumenthal for especially that purpose. And by the way, he headed a company that stood to gain financially from the ouster of Gaddafi.
Let me just add one other thing. There was never a humanitarian crisis in Benghazi. What was happening, Gaddafi was our ally killing the al-Qaeda militias. That was what was going on. So, you know, the right to protect really doesn't fit that
Yeah, exactly.
equation.
Benghazi was the font, the fountain, if you will, of the revolution. It's where the al-Qaeda militias, like Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, were headquartered. If Benghazi had fallen in March of 2011, as it was on the verge of doing, no civilian disaster, simply the defeat of the rebels at Benghazi, the revolution may well have failed. The Obama administration did not want to let that happen.
Now that I know what R2P is, I knew right to protect. I was just caught up on the acronym there for a second.
Use it on Sudan, which of
No.
course they've never used
I
on
know.
Sudan.
Well, let's back to Libya. What we know is when the UN resolution was being debated, it was primarily to impose a no-fly zone. We know that Samantha Powers, in the last minute before the final vote was taken, stuck in language about basically protecting people, and then they talked about the pending humanitarian disaster. Well, two things, or several things. Pursuant to the law of war, a impending humanitarian disaster is not cause sufficient for one nation to attack another nation. So even if there was an impending, humanitarian disaster, the action would have been in violation of the law of war. We know that that there was no pending humanitarian disaster, but more importantly, you had asked about my truce initiative. That's why I jumped up here to respond. The truce initiative started after the bombing had started. The bombing was underway while I was doing the discussions. In the first several days of bombing, the no-fly zone had been imposed. They took out their surface-to-air missiles, and the columns of troops had stopped because that was one of the shows of good faith, so they had no pending humanitarian disaster, even the threat of. So at that point in time, there was, they had fulfilled the UN resolution. In fact, the UN resolution, the first provision of it was to press for a ceasefire. And so in many respects, by throwing out the truce, not only did they attack in violation of the law of war, they didn't even follow the UN resolution. And that's what, so I'm not going to comment on motivation. I'm just trying to tell you the facts. And that's why when it came time to talk about it, and the Libyan business colleagues came and said, what can we do? I said, we must keep the politicians out of it. We must keep the diplomats out of it. This is something that needs to be settled by military commander to military commander. I told them about the law of war, the requirement to parley on the battlefield under a white flag if one commander, we haven't done that for a while, but it's there in the law of war, and it was well received by both sides, including Africa Command and the Libyans. And had we proceeded, there's no telling where the negotiation would go. They were intended to facilitate the abdication and a ceasefire with African Union observers, but the frustration after that was that I think Admiral Lyons mentioned it, all we were asking for was 72 hours to give peace a chance, and they really wouldn't take it.
Yeah, John. You want to come up? Okay.
Sure. I want to ask a little bit about the timing. In the FOIA suit, we've asked from the DOD all the orders, the initial orders. And we haven't gotten them. We've gotten some redacted documents, and we've got some documents, 500 pages from the DOD, but they refer to earlier orders. Now, we just heard, I just found out, because I haven't read Mr. Gowdy's report, that the order was given at 7 o'clock. Well, the attack began at local time. The attack began at 3:42 local time. I don't. That's that's three hours later. I don't understand. Maybe that's why they redacted it, because we don't know what time.
42 Eastern time.
Eastern time. Yeah. Yeah.
Local hour.
Right, and local time. I just understood that Mr. Panetta gave the order at 7 o'clock. Is that? And also, I read a piece out of the Gowdy's report that said that Secretary Panetta and the president said, go to it, but they didn't do it. I mean, you can't just.
He said that at 5 o'clock. Then Panetta went back to the Pentagon, and as the report says, then the written order, was issued, or the order was issued at 7 o'clock.
Well,
It took him that time between the meeting went from 5 o'clock to something, then he went back to the Pentagon, then they figured out what assets they had, I guess, and the order was given at 7, according to the report.
This, this is all nuts. That's what John's getting at. Here, you got an attack going on, and we're going, well, let's see, we get this little order and task this guy over here, and then 3.5 hours later, we finally get something out. This is crazy.
Well, Secretary Panetta testified that he met with the president at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, 5 o'clock.
That's an hour and 15 minutes after the attack. They were fighting for their lives. An hour and 15 minutes later, he said he teed up some other issues, and then he talked about Benghazi, and then he went back to the Pentagon. There was no follow-up questions, but that's rush hour traffic. And then he called these. It just is. There's something missing here. I don't know. If,
well, let me give you the Ace Lyons theory. And it's one of the laws of self-preservation. The morning of the attack, John Teagan came over from the CIA annex, and he said to Stevens, look, we know we're going to have an attack. We don't know exactly when, but we can give you much better protection if you shift your meetings to the CIA annex. Okay? I mean, the laws of self-preservation, that's what you do. Well, why didn't he do it? Well, when I was on the Lou Dobbs show, Lou said to me, what do you think happened? I said, this has all the smell of an operation that went terribly wrong. And you'll read in Pompeo's side report and Duncan's side report, they talk about, they were out to kill or kidnap Americans. And I told Lou, I said, if I had to speculate, my view is that Stevens was never to be killed. He was to be kidnapped and held hostage in exchange for the blind sheikh. And the reason being, that was Morsi's #1 objective. He campaigned to be president on that. He then came to Washington the summer of 2012. It was his #1 objective. We also know, I've only seen one thing on it, we know that the blind sheikh was getting ready to be moved, and then nothing. Yeah, Stephanie?
Admiral, I have a comment on that very subject, and maybe you can elaborate a little bit more. So when I read the Gowdy report, I was quite surprised to hear this in the Gowdy report. They talked about in the report the protest at the U.S. Embassy in Cairo. And before mentioning the protest in response to the Muhammad video, they actually state in the report that the protest was primarily over the release of the blind sheikh.
Yeah.
And some of the Muhammad video. I never heard that in the media. It was always the Muhammad video. The Gowdy report specifically states the primary reason for the protest in Cairo was over the blind sheikh, and they were demanding his release. This is in the Gowdy report verbatim from witnesses. So,
the priority throughout 2012 was on the part of the Egyptian Morsi Muslim Brotherhood government, the release of the blind sheikh. They had been in negotiations with the White House. A delegation had actually come over to the United States and met at the National Security Council about this. The relationship between the President Obama administration and the Morsi administration was going very swimmingly at this point, and I think the Egyptian government had every expectation that they would get whatever they wanted. The Obama administration, they had them eating out of their hand. However, by September the 9th, as you'll recall, that is when the Egyptian TV talk show host first aired on Egyptian TV the clip from the Innocence of Muslims video. That is at the point, 48 hours out, when social media among Egyptian Muslims, as well as then spreading around the world, began to register outrage over the video. The video took precedence. It pushed the focus on the blind sheikh out of the focus, out of the focus, out of the spotlight. And on a dime, the U.S. government also flipped from its focus on the blind sheikh to the video because it was manna from heaven for them. It fit perfectly into the OIC Hillary Clinton State Department agenda about criminalizing criticism of Islam. The blind sheikh could wait. He was going to get released at some point, but this took precedence because it fell in their laps.
Tom, where is this going to go from here? What do you see happening, or what should happen?
Well, not what should happen, where it's going to go. It's not going to go anywhere. When you have both Republicans and Democrats that do not want to do it, and I hate to be so negative on it because this is really a superb report. History will treat it well, I believe, but you have some powerful elements in this country driven and the media complicit that is not going to let this story get out, no matter all the facts that we've laid out. And again, Trey Gowdy could have really put out a gangbuster report with conclusions and recommendations, et cetera. Chuck has got another strategy he thinks he's trying to use, but the fact is I'm very skeptical with all this good work and all these facts that it's going to happen, and I think they're going for the emails right now.
So we'll take a couple more questions. Denny, sorry.
Statement.
Okay, come on.
For starters, to emphasize what the Admiral and others have said is Gaddafi and his older son took out a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal. Is anybody here from the Wall Street Journal? And years ago, and what they had was the two of them, Gaddafi in his flowing robes and his son in secular garb, and they were discussing, and it was all in interview format, full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal about how they wanted to turn Libya into a mecca for travelers to come. And this was years and years. This was in the, I don't know how many years ago, but I remember that vividly. So, and they were dead set against it. And not only were they not, there wasn't going to be any tumultuous amount of carnage in Benghazi, there wasn't going to be any tumultuous carnage anywhere in Libya. It was very directly, as has been mentioned, and actually as I learned from this commission, Gaddafi was out there killing bad guys. He was killing Al-Qaeda. And Al-Qaeda, we supported. They went to Syria. They became ISIS. We developed ISIS. That's a fact. Now, to the gentleman that's sitting right there, of course, he got up and left, wanted to talk about the T word going into, I know somebody else brought the T up, but at any rate, the divisiveness between the Republicans and the Democrats there, don't believe a word of it. I was privy in 2013. Special Operations Speaks in support of Frank Wolf, Representative Wolf, bringing about his request for a House Select Committee, and it had to be a Select Committee in order to get classified information, sworn classified testimony. In support of what he was doing there in July, we came out with this Special Operations Speaks, 700 Special Operations Forces personnel signed this scroll, and we rolled it out in front of the congressional steps of the House of Representatives there. And in the lead up to that, the couple of days to that, myself and a couple other members of Special Operations Speaks went beating on doors down in the House of Representatives, which I swore I would never get into, but at any rate I did. And along with it was one of the people from our political arm. And this was a guy who was a congressional staffer. And he went over to the dark side, went over to the lobbyists. Of course, the lobbyists thought he came from the dark side. And then he came to this political media, which he saw as kind of a medium between the two, that he was still active in that. And when he left that media company, he went back into the congressional staff. But I say that only because he had a tremendous amount of background going for him. And he said of the 100 senators and the 435 congressmen, and I call those the 535 Congress critters, and you can add 10 staff to them for each one, that's over 5,000 people. That's a small city, certainly a large city in some instances, but that's a whole lot of people. and they all believe in the same percentages. What this guy told me, he says 10 to 15%, and I don't believe that 15% really have the best interests of the United States of America at heart. 25 to 35% do, but, and there's a big caveat there. The 55% that remain, or however many remain, 55 to 60% that remain, are only there to stay in power, are only there to keep their others in their own party in power. They're only there to keep others in the other party in power. Think about why George H.W. Bush is such good buddies with Bill Clinton. Now, why would that possibly be? I don't know about that, but all I know is they're in it to keep themselves and each other in power. So Trump comes along, that's when the Republican machine that I wasn't aware of came out in full force. They're just as bad as any other political machine. So Trump has nothing to do with it except illuminating the truth, and that's a good thing.
I guess the whole time I've been thinking, what can we do to prevent this from happening again? And the only two things that come to mind, and there's your attorney over there, how can any government go back and purge records is questionable to me. Is that legal? And how can any government require employees to sign ad hoc NDAs that are not necessarily part of the federal procedures of disclosure? Are those two things, am I making this up, or it just seems like legally, both of those I question.
You got to have a Congress that oversights and handles them. We don't have a Congress that has got oversight on this administration. They're both corrupt. Both parties are corrupt, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's where we are today. That's why I say we don't have congressional leadership. It isn't there. Or you wouldn't have the out-of-control situation that you see throughout the country today.
If I might add, on the NDAs, very directly, after the fact, when somebody has come in contact with a black program, the people in charge of that program make sure anybody in contact with it signs an NDA that states that they will never disclose anything that they know about that program.
That's legal.
That's legal.
That's legal.
That's done. I don't know about the legality.
All right, folks, I think it's been an enlightening day, and thank you all for being here.